Welcome to Viva's network training course. We're in the final unit, Unit 6, Measurement and Impact, and we're on our final principle, number 3, Evaluation. We've come a long way through the 25 different principles. So we're going to look at this measurement and impact together. And there are 3 principles in this module. First, we've looked at program planning and the importance of careful planning in order to be able to do measurement and impact. Second, we've looked at monitoring as the program goes on. And so in this last video, we're looking at program evaluation. Of course, program is referring to different activities that will contribute to bringing about lasting change for children. And in our context, we're talking about that specifically within a network, which is much broader than program. But for the sake of our discussion, we're referring to program. So when you complete a program or a period of funding, you would normally be asked to do some sort of closure report or some evaluation. And you might do that as a team, or you might be asked to bring in an external evaluator. And these are the sorts of things that you might well be asked in a template if you're given one. First of all, you would have to give the outputs for that period of time, whether it's 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, or in some exceptional cases, it might be longer than that. So your outputs are looking at the numbers, the number of children you've impacted, the number of adults, the number of members. And the important thing with that is that you've been consistent in your data collection and that you've been able to disaggregate. That means you can say how many males, females, and whether any of them had disability. They would be the things that they're particularly looking for. So boys, girls, mothers, fathers, males, females, and whether any of those had any disability. There might be other what are called subgroups as well, where maybe there's a particular tribal disadvantage that you've been particularly trying to intervene in. In order to count your outputs well, you would have needed to have had a very good data storage system. These days that's mainly electronic. It can be Access, it could be Excel, but you need somebody who's really diligent and really careful to make sure the data is up to date, accurate, clean. That means that all the spelling errors and so on have been removed. And then from that, you would be able to analyze and collate. There are all sorts of ways to do it. Excel can pretty much do anything you like. And some of us have learned most of what we know from watching YouTube. So there's hope for us all. Every year in December, Viva asks each network to do the annual network health check, which is basically a way to collect all of your data into one place. And if you can't put your hand on that, then we would have that, and at least we can help you with those numbers that you've reported. Outputs is one thing, but what people are really interested in is what's the outcome. So what? I mean, you've met that many people, you've helped that many people. What impact has that actually had on their lives? You can do something called outcome mapping. You would bring outcomes out through things like focus group discussions where you're asking them what the impact has been in their lives. And again, we could help you to think through some of those things. And then you would want the success of your program to come out very, very clearly. The best way to do that, of course, is to have had a baseline, depending on the duration, some sort of midline as well, and then the end point. So you've got very similar questions asked, beginning, middle, and end, and then you can track the change in that data. You match that with your outcome information, and you should have a very strong story. And that takes us to the next point of stories. Hopefully you will have created and collated some stories that come from your beneficiaries of how their lives have changed. Maybe you've been able to do some video diaries, same children over a period of time. Maybe there's clips that you're able to take at the end of a training, and then maybe 3 months on. And obviously they could be written or they could be in video form, but people are really appreciating videos these days. Just to note that you protect a child's identity. That doesn't mean to say you have to blank out their faces, but you should not be giving their real names and locations and anything in any pictures or stories that would identify their names and where they come from. So you anonymize all of that. The donor will also look for value for money, whether you've been efficient, effective, and whether you've had good economy. They're the 3 E's that are often used to judge your value for money. Unfortunately, we can't measure it in an Excel spreadsheet, but let me give you an example. If you paid school fees and that's all you did, that's not really going to last very long. It lasts for that period and then it's over. Whereas if you were helping maybe a school to set up a parental savings group and an income generating project, then the parents would be able to start to generate their own income. Now, would it be cheaper in a sense to just pay the school fees? Sometimes it certainly feels like it would be a lot less hassle. But is that the best way? Is that going to give you long-term effectiveness? And so it might even cost you more to have that parental business set up than it would to pay the school fees. But over a longer period of time, you're likely to get a better success rate from a strategy like that. Donors will often ask you about the challenges that you've faced and how you handled them. And it's not that you shouldn't have had challenges, it's that they're expecting that you've been able to change and to adapt as you've gone through. And of course, we're all facing the challenges of COVID and how we've had to adapt to that. You can't just carry on the way that you used to. And so how are you adapting to a new situation? And finally, in program evaluation, they would be wanting to know what works and can it be shared with others. Is it that you have a particular strategy that has worked very well? Can you evidence that? I know with our work with evaluators, we make quite bold statements, and the next question that always comes is, prove it. And so your program closure report, your end of program evaluation, is really going to be asking you to prove it. And it's always more robust, it's always better validated if that has some external input. So in order to get all of that right, if you want a good end report, then the easiest thing to do is to get it right from the start. We often find when we're writing proposals that we hardly have the time to write the proposal, let alone to think 3 years in advance and everything that's required. But here are some tips as you look to the future. First, make sure you've got very clear goals and outcomes. What exactly is it that you want to see in 3 to 5 years' time? Secondly, make sure you have clear targets and clear deliverables. How many children, families, etc. will you be helping? How many police will you be engaging? How many of whatever? And be clear in that. And if that looks like it's not going to work, then as soon as you realise that, you would go back to the donor and negotiate. Make sure you have systematic monitoring in place. Even if it's simple, you don't have professional monitoring people in place, you can't afford them, still to have your strategies in place and you do them regularly and persistently. It requires careful planning in how you're going to do your monitoring. It can't be a thought as you're walking down the corridor to do something, oh gosh, we better carry a clipboard with us and ask some questions. You need to think through it very, very carefully. You need clear indicators. Indicators are very difficult to get right, and it's okay to keep updating and changing them as long as somehow you've got a sequence of data. The Sustainable Development Goals have hundreds of indicators, and you have to work through very carefully to choose just one or two and then domesticate them and get them down to the level that you want. That would be one way that you could do it. You will need some data collection tools, and before you go lock, stock and barrel with using them with everybody, you would first test them in small pilots of maybe 5 or 10 people and make sure that the questions are understood and that they're giving you the sorts of answers that you would want. And then ensure accurate reporting in your narrative and your finance. The numbers need to add up across them. And within your own narrative report or any spreadsheets, if you say, for example, you've reached 354 children, then that needs to be reflected in your expenditure. It needs to be reflected in your spreadsheets as well. So all your numbers, by the time you're reporting, should be consistent. We've talked already about stories, and there's a way that you can collect stories and look for stories. What are the most significant stories? That doesn't mean to say you collect everything. One way to do it is to deliberately go out and look for the best stories. Where have things changed the most? And what does that look like? And then dig around with the parents and the children to try and find out why. And that then is going to tell you what works. So that's quite a lot to digest, but we're going to press on here because all that we've taken you through in this networker training course is in order to become a sustainable, viable network. And Viva has identified 10 things that would indicate that your network is going to survive and it has a future. So please forgive me for a dense text, but I thought it's best that we just look at exactly as it is. Benchmark number 1 is that we understand children's needs and current response. And you probably remember us talking about having a mapping report every 3 to 5 years. Number 2 is that your network has a clear purpose and a clear vision. That would be indicated in a mission and a vision statement. You would have a value proposition to present to people, and you would know your distinctives, what makes you as a network different from any other network, from any other organisation. Number 3 is you would have a strategic plan, which would cover probably 3 to 5 years. And that strategic plan should have direction both for your programs and for how you're going to develop the network and its relationships. The 4th benchmark is to have a strong relationship with Viva and with other networks. You can evidence that by having agreements of how you will work together and by attending events. At the moment they would be virtual, but when they can be face-to-face, then there's great benefit in networks meeting together, talking, sharing and praying. Benchmark 5 is that your network has clear leadership and staff structures. That would mean you have a full-time coordinator. you would have a steering group, and you would have different working groups. Number 6, you have good governance and good accountability. And at least there would be 4 things that we would expect to see in place: child protection, finance and governance policies with all their variations and their shoot-offs of risk and safeguarding and so on, but they would be your 3 essentials. And then, in order to have governance, and that means progress, is that you would be studying as a network this networker training course and making sure that there are others in the network who are learning and developing. Benchmark 7 is that you've got a strong membership base. You would build that by capacity building, by having strong management systems of records and data and WhatsApp groups and Facebook and whatever else you can manage to keep people connected. And then, of course, Viva offers you the World Weekend of Prayer, the Good Treatment Campaign, QAS, Christmas parties, many initiatives, which we would encourage you to do because they're designed deliberately to bring the network together. Number 8 is to have collective action outputs, where you know exactly how many children you are helping, and you've got credible measurements and reporting for what you've achieved. And we've just discussed that. Number 9, to be viable, to be sustainable, is you would have some citywide influence. And you could evidence that by having an agreement with the authorities or other partners in the city. Maybe you would have an MOU where you're agreeing to work together. And number 10, and this is the one that we find the most difficult everywhere around the world, is to have an active fundraising strategy. That means you would have a communications plan for your donors. You would have a fundraising strategy. You would have an in-country fundraising strategy to raise money to at least have your coordinator who stands outside of all donor relationships in terms of pay, that you would be able to continue to maintain a basic office, travel, communication, the very basic, the very core of your network function to be able to deliver even if the donors are not there. And so the Networker Training course, we hope, has indicated these 10 things. We have taken you through them during these 6 modules. Thank you very much for your tenacity in getting through this. And this is what we hope Viva specializes in, is to help you in each of these 10 things to get to that point of sustainability. So we're here for you. Please call us. We are ready to support. Thank you, and God bless you.